The Legend of Amara, the end of twin killings. In the shadow of a curse that demanded the lives of innocents, one woman's courage ignited a revolution. As the night air crackled with fear and whispers of the past, Amara's heart raced with a daring choice: to flee into the darkness with her newborn twins or to challenge a fate written in blood.
Like and subscribe.
Long ago, in a remote African village named Umachis, there was a belief that twins were an abomination, a curse sent by the gods to punish the people. The villagers thought that when twins were born, it meant the land would suffer famine, disease, or disaster. For generations, every set of twins born in Umachis was immediately taken to the dark forest to be killed. It was the chief's duty to protect the village from the wrath of the gods, and so the tradition continued. In this village lived Amara, a strong young woman known for her kindness and bravery. Unlike her fellow villagers, who lived in fear of the gods, Amara often found solace in her grandmother's stories of distant lands where twins were celebrated and cherished. In those lands, her grandmother had whispered with a twinkle in her eye, "Twins are believed to bring prosperity and strength." These tales filled Amara's heart with hope, but also with a deep-seated fear of the oppressive traditions that ruled her own village. One fateful day, after many hours of labor, Amara gave birth to two beautiful baby boys, twins. When she saw them for the first time, her heart swelled with love, but that joy was quickly overshadowed by a paralyzing fear. She knew what the village would do if they found out. As she cradled her sons, their tiny fingers wrapping around hers, she felt the walls of her small hut closing in. The world outside buzzed with anticipation, and her mind raced, torn between the desire to protect her children and the dread of what awaited them. News of the birth spread quickly, as it always did in small villages. The women who had helped Amara during childbirth exchanged nervous glances, their faces pale with dread. They had seen the tragedy unfold too many times before. Ijeoma, one of the older women, who had witnessed the devastation of twin killings, ran immediately to the chief's palace, unable to bear the weight of the secret. Within the hour, the chief summoned his warriors. "Amara has given birth to twins," he said solemnly, his voice heavy with fear. "You know the law. You must take the babies." Amara, sensing danger, wrapped her babies tightly in a thick blanket, their soft cries barely audible as she whispered soothing words into their ears. The wind howled outside, and the night sky was covered in dark clouds, as if the heavens themselves were warning of the danger that lurked. Her heart raced, and sweat drenched her brow. How could she save them? Just as the flickering torches of the warriors appeared in the distance, Amara made a decision. With one last deep breath, she slipped out of the back door into the inky blackness of the forest, her feet barely touching the ground as she ran, clutching her babies. The forest loomed before her, dark and ominous. Tall trees stretched high into the sky, their twisted branches forming grotesque shapes in the dim moonlight. Every step felt like a gamble, one wrong move, and she could trip, alerting the warriors. As she ventured deeper into the forest, she felt the chill of the night air biting at her skin. The twins stirred in her arms, sensing their mother's fear, their soft whimpers threatening to give them away. Behind her, the warriors reached her hut. They kicked open the door, expecting to find the twins in their mother's arms. But the room was empty. One of the warriors, Ogbo, snarled in frustration. "She has fled," he spat, turning to his companions. "Search the village. She cannot have gone far." The warriors spread out, their torches casting eerie shadows as they combed the village. They checked every hut, every corner, and even the fields. They questioned the villagers, who could only shake their heads in confusion. Amara and her twins were nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, Amara ran deeper into the forest, her legs trembling from exhaustion. The sound of the warriors' shouts echoed behind her, panic surging through her. "Sure, my loves," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Please, stay quiet. We must stay quiet." She stumbled over a fallen branch, barely catching herself before she fell. Pressing her back against a tree, she tried to catch her breath. The warriors' voices grew louder. One warrior stepped closer, torchlight sweeping over the bushes. Amara held her breath, clutching the twins tighter, praying they wouldn't cry out. Her heart pounded so loudly in her chest she feared the warriors would hear it. Just as the warrior's hand reached out to part the leaves, a distant howl echoed through the forest. He froze, his attention drawn away. "Did you hear that?" he asked the others. "It's just the wolves," one of the other warriors muttered. "We need to find her before the gods grow angry." The first warrior hesitated, then lowered his torch and turned away. Amara let out a silent breath of relief. The gods, or perhaps something else, had saved her, for now. The search continued for hours. Ogbo grew more frustrated with each passing minute. He had never failed in his duties, but tonight, it seemed, the gods were testing him. "We will find her," he growled, his eyes narrowing in the darkness. "She cannot escape the will of the gods." As dawn approached, the warriors were forced to return to the village, empty-handed and defeated. Deep in the forest, Amara finally stopped running. She found a small cave hidden behind thick bushes and crawled inside, shaking from exhaustion. The babies had fallen asleep in her arms, their cries replaced by soft breathing. Tears streamed down Amara's face as she leaned against the cold stone wall of the cave. She had escaped, but for how long? Days passed, and Amara remained hidden in the forest. She foraged for food, gathering berries and roots, and found a stream where she could drink. But every moment was a struggle. The nights were cold, and the twins often cried from hunger. Amara's heart broke every time she heard their cries, but she couldn't risk going back to the village for help. The villagers were too afraid of the gods to defy the chief's orders. Back in the village, the chief grew impatient. The dark clouds above Yumachi's had not cleared, and the villagers were beginning to whisper. They feared the gods were angry because the twins had not been found. Some even believed the twins' disappearance had brought a curse upon the village. Sitting in his palace, the chief stared out at the darkened sky, torn between his duty and growing doubt about old traditions. He had seen many twins taken to the forest over the years, but none had survived. This time, something was different. The gods had not sent disaster upon the village, and the longer the twins remained alive, the more the chief began to question the old beliefs. One sleepless night, the elder, Nkem, approached him. The oldest and wisest man in the village, Nkem had followed traditions for years but began to see the cracks in their foundation. "The people are afraid, Nkem," the chief said, his voice heavy with worry. "The clouds do not part, and they believe the gods will punish us for not finding the twins." Nkem nodded slowly, his eyes filled with understanding. "But have the gods truly shown their anger?" "Yes, the sky is dark, but there has been no famine, no sickness, no death. Perhaps we have been wrong about the twins. Perhaps they are not a curse." The chief frowned, his hands tightening around the armrests of his chair. "But the people, they fear the gods. If we do nothing, they may turn against me. Or," Nkem said softly, "they may realize the truth. We have followed these traditions for generations, but we have never questioned them. It is time to ask ourselves if we are doing the right thing." The chief sat in silence, his mind racing. Could it be possible that the gods did not wish for the twins to die? Could the old belief have been wrong all along? After weeks of hiding, Amara knew she could not stay in the forest forever. Her sons were growing stronger, but the forest was dangerous. She had to return to the village, but she feared what would happen if she did. Would the chief's warriors take her children? Would the villagers still believe in the curse? One evening, just as the sun began to set, Amara wrapped her babies in a thick cloth and stepped out of the cave. Her legs were weak from days of little food, but determination fueled her steps. She walked through the forest, her heart pounding. As she neared the edge of the village, she saw the flickering lights of the villagers' homes in the distance. Amara took a deep breath and stepped forward, her sons held tightly in her arms. As she entered the village, the people gasped. Mothers pulled their children close, and men whispered among themselves. Fear filled the air, but Amara did not waver. She walked straight to the chief's palace, her steps steady despite the terror gnawing at her heart. When she reached the door, she pushed it open with a strength she didn't know she possessed. The chief and Elden Kem were seated inside, their expressions shifting from surprise to confusion. "Amara," the chief exclaimed. "You." "Please," she interrupted, her voice strong and clear. "I come not to challenge you but to share my truth. These are my sons, and they are not a curse. They are a blessing, a promise of hope for our village. I have hidden them because I feared for their lives, but the gods have not sent punishment upon us. They have sent these boys to help us break free from fear." The chief's brow furrowed. "But the tradition can bind us, but it can also set us free," Kem spoke, stepping forward. "Amara speaks the truth. We have lived in fear for too long. It is time we learn from our past instead of letting it dictate our future." Whispers spread through the gathered villagers as they listened. Slowly, the chief nodded, his face softening. "Then let us change our ways. From this day forward, twins shall no longer be harmed. Instead, they will be welcomed into our village, as they should have been all along." Amara's heart soared. The villagers began to murmur in agreement, a wave of understanding washing over them. In that moment, the dark clouds that had loomed above Yumachi's began to part, allowing the sun to shine through, casting light over the village for the first time in what felt like ages. The villagers gathered around Amara, and she could see hope shining in their eyes. They had embraced the truth, and she knew her sons would grow up in a world where they would be loved and accepted, no longer bound by the chains of fear. As the sun set, Amara held her twins close, her heart filled with joy. They were no longer victims of a cruel tradition, they were symbols of change. The legacy of Yumachi's was beginning to shift, and the future looked bright for her family and the village. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy the story, kindly share your opinion and don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Chukwudi Alola Studio at Chukwudi Alola. Thank you once again.